The details are scarce, but we can confirm a triple homicide.
My mom said no to a camping trip because something felt off. 3 days later, a family of 3 was found murdered 10 miles from our house. And the man who'd asked to take my brothers camping had bee stings that only made sense if he'd been running through thick brush. When I was little, 5, maybe 6 years old, we lived way out in the country, and I mean out there. Not a small town, not even a village, just a scattered collection of houses along gravel roads with fields stretching out in every direction. Nobody locked their doors. We didn't even have keys to ours. If you left, you just left. Everyone knew everyone, and there was this heavy, unspoken trust between all of us. About a quarter mile down the road, there was a neighbor, an older woman, a widow. To me, she was basically a third grandmother. I rode my bike down to her house all the time. She always had snacks, Little Debbie cakes, homemade cookies, and she'd let me play in her living room while she watched her stories on TV. She kept a bin of toys from when her own kids were little. My favorite was this old school Mr. Potato Head, the kind where you used an actual potato and pushed plastic eyes and a mouth into it. I spent hours doing that on her living room rug, completely in my own world. She had a son. He was an adult, mid-20s at the time. He'd been away for a while, either military or working out of state, and at some point he moved back in with her. I didn't interact with him much. To a 6-year-old, a 25-year-old is just another boring adult in the background. He seemed quiet. He'd sit on the porch and smoke, and he'd watch me ride my bike in circles in the driveway. He never yelled at me, never did anything mean. He just had this blank stare that I didn't understand at the time, and that I think about a lot now. One afternoon, he walked over to our house to talk to my mom. My older brothers were teenagers, 14 and 15. He told my mom he was planning a camping trip for the weekend, down at the river bottoms a few miles past our property. "I can take the boys with me," he said. "Show them some survival stuff. It'll be fun." In our community, this kind of offer was completely normal. Neighbors took each other's kids fishing and hunting all the time. There was nothing unusual about the words coming out of his mouth. But my mom got a feeling. She told me about it years later, said the hair on the back of her neck stood straight up. No logical reason. He was their sweet neighbor's son. He was a veteran. Everything about the situation was ordinary. She looked at him and said, "No, they've got chores to do this weekend." He didn't push back, just shrugged, said, "Suit yourself," and walked back down the gravel road. A few days later, my mom and I ran into him at the general store, the only store within 20 miles. We were grabbing milk. He was at the counter buying cigarettes. He looked terrible, face puffy and red, both arms covered in welts. My mom asked what happened. He scratched at his arm and said he'd gotten into a nest of ground bees down at the creek. Tore him up pretty good. We left, got in the car. My mom went quiet. See, we spent every summer at that creek. She knew every inch of it. The banks were mostly clay and rock. Ground bees were rare there. And even if there had been a nest, for a grown man to get stung that many times all over his arms, he'd have had to be doing something bizarre. Crashing through thick underbrush, running through heavy brush where people don't walk. The kind of dense, overgrown terrain where you'd disturb a nest if you were, say, chasing someone or hiding. The story didn't add up, not for a casual walk by the water. 2 days later, the news broke. A family of 3 had been found murdered at a campsite about 10 miles from our house. A mom, a dad, and their young son. They'd been camping in a secluded area way off the main trails. People in our area were in total shock. Murders didn't happen here. Maybe a theft once in a while, a fight, but not this. Not a triple homicide. People started locking their doors for the first time in their lives. My mom sat at the kitchen table watching the news report, and I saw her face go pale. She was doing the math. The area where the bodies were found, it wasn't the clean, rocky creek he claimed to have been walking by. It was deep in the woods. Dense, heavy, overgrown brush. Exactly the kind of terrain where you'd get torn apart by ground bees if you were running through it. She called the police. I remember being sent to my room while 2 detectives sat in our living room. Big, serious men in suits who looked completely out of place in our farmhouse. My mom told them everything: the camping offer, the gut feeling, the bee stings, the timeline, the geography. The detectives listened. Then one of them said, "You're not the only one who called about him." They brought him in for questioning, searched his truck, found things that raised flags. I heard later it was a specific type of knife or rope, or both. But this was before DNA technology was what it is now. The bee stings were suspicious, but they weren't proof. His mother gave him an alibi for part of the night, probably trying to protect her son. There wasn't enough hard evidence to make an arrest. The case went cold. He moved away a few months later. Life slowly went back to normal. My mom never let us go to the neighbor's house alone again. The sweet old lady passed away a few years after that. Fast forward 5 years. I was a preteen. We were watching TV when a news flash came across the screen. It was him. He'd been arrested in a different state. A woman had run out of gas on a lonely stretch of highway. He'd pulled over in his truck and offered her a ride to the nearest gas station. Once she was in the truck, he attacked her, tried to abduct her, tried to kill her, but she fought back. She managed to unlock the door and throw herself out of the moving truck. She survived and flagged down another car. He went to prison for abduction and attempted murder. As far as I know, he's still there. After the arrest was made public, the detective who had sat in our living room all those years ago called my mom. Off the record, he told her, they had always known it was him who killed that family. The patterns matched, the violence matched. They just never got the evidence they needed to close the case. I played with his childhood toys. I sat on his mother's living room rug. And the thing that stays with me, the thing I can't let go of, isn't the murders or the bee stings or any of it. It's the 2 seconds it took my mom to say no. That's all that stood between my brothers and whatever happened to that family in the woods. 2 seconds, and a feeling she couldn't explain. He didn't run away. He didn't yell. He just turned around and walked calmly back down the driveway and into the dark, like he'd finished a chore. This happened during my senior year of high school. It didn't happen directly to me, but it happened to people I loved, and I was there for the aftermath. I've never really been able to shake it. It was a Tuesday night, completely random. I was already in bed around 11:30, just scrolling my phone, when my best friend called me. I'll call him Ryan. We'd been best friends since middle school. He wasn't a dramatic person. If he called this late, it was usually to plan a food run or hop on a game together. But when I picked up, his voice was wrong. He sounded like he'd just sprinted a mile, but also somehow small, thin, like something had taken the air out of him. "I need you to come over. Please, just come over." I sat up. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "Something happened. The police are here. Just get here." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I threw on a hoodie and shoes, ran downstairs, told my parents Ryan was in trouble and I had to go. They heard the panic in my voice and didn't argue. I got in my car and drove. Ryan lived in a subdivision about 10 minutes away. Nice neighborhood, quiet, well lit, the kind of street where people walk their dogs at midnight without a second thought. When I got to the main entrance, I immediately understood why his voice had sounded like that. A police cruiser was parked sideways across both entrance lanes, lights flashing silently against the trees. An officer stood outside, tense, hand resting near his belt. I rolled my window down. "Road's closed, son." I told him my best friend lived in the cul-de-sac at the top of the hill and had just called me. He looked at me for a second, then glanced up toward the sirens coming from higher up. "Go ahead, but stay in your car when you get there until an officer clears you." I drove slowly up the winding hill. When I crested the top and turned into the cul-de-sac, the scene hit me all at once. 4, maybe 5 police cars parked at wild angles, their lights strobing off the brick houses and the manicured lawns, turning the whole familiar street into something out of a nightmare. Before I even got the car in park, Ryan came running out of his front door. He ran right past a cop who tried to stop him and met me in the street. He looked pale in a way I'd never seen before, like all the blood had drained out of him. He was shivering, even though the night was warm. "What happened?" I asked. He pointed at the house next door. "Someone broke in. They beat her. They beat Mrs. Klein." Mrs. Klein was his neighbor. An older woman, lived alone, kept to herself, always waved when you drove past. Ryan told me the whole thing in fast, shaking bursts. He'd been in his room when he heard screaming. Not a yelp, not a shout, screaming. The terrified, guttural kind that you feel in your chest. Someone had broken into Mrs. Klein's house. He'd used something heavy, a tire iron or a crowbar, police thought, and he'd gone straight for her. No demand to open a safe, no get on the floor. He just started hitting her the second he was inside. Somehow she got away from him. She ran out her front door and across the lawn to Ryan's house. Ryan's dad was out of town on a business trip, so it was just Ryan and his mom home. His mom heard banging on the door, the frantic, desperate kind. She thought maybe there'd been a car accident. She unlocked the door and opened it. Mrs. Klein fell into the foyer. Ryan said she was covered in blood, pouring from her head. She collapsed right onto the welcome mat. Ryan's mom looked up. The attacker was already coming up the front walkway. Not running, walking, calm and focused, heavy tool still in his hand, like he was just finishing a job he'd started. Ryan's mom grabbed Mrs. Klein by the shirt and dragged her fully inside. She threw her weight against the door and got the deadbolt locked just as he reached the porch. He hit the door with the tool. When it didn't give, he swung it at the small decorative window at the very top of the door and shattered it. Glass rained down onto Ryan's mom and Mrs. Klein on the floor. Ryan's mom started screaming that she had a gun. She didn't, and that the police were on their way. The man stopped. He didn't try to reach through the broken window. He didn't say a word. He just turned around, walked back down the driveway, and disappeared into the dark of the street before the first police car arrived. He didn't run. He strolled, like he'd finished a chore and was heading home. The police let me go inside with Ryan. They wanted us off the street while they searched the woods behind the subdivision. Walking into that foyer is something I will never be able to unsee. It wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't a tasteful smear. There was a pool of blood on the hardwood floor where Mrs. Klein had collapsed. Handprints smeared on the white baseboards where she tried to pull herself up. And above the door, the shattered semicircle window, glass scattered across the bloody floor below. A smear of blood on the doorframe way up high, where the weapon had connected. It told you everything about his height and how much force he'd used. If Ryan's mom had been 2 seconds slower getting that door shut, he would have been inside the house with all 3 of them. I spent the night. Neither of us slept. We sat in the living room with every light on, listening to the police radios outside, jumping at every branch that scraped the siding. There were 2 cruisers parked in front of the house all night. It still didn't feel safe. The walls felt like paper. Mrs. Klein survived. They had to staple her scalp shut. She had defensive bruising up and down her arms. But she lived. She put her house on the market a week later and moved out of state. Can't blame her. They never caught him. He wore gloves, no fingerprints on the door. The cul-de-sac had no cameras with a clear angle on his face, just a dark shape in a hoodie. Police said it appeared completely random. He picked a house, broke in, and when his plan got interrupted, he walked away to avoid getting caught. To this day, when I drive past that subdivision, I think about the blood on that floor, and I think about him walking calmly into the darkness, unhurried, completely in control, knowing that nobody caught him, knowing he's probably still out there somewhere.
We just wanted to walk around at 2 a.m. That's it. We weren't looking for trouble. But something in the dark that night found us first. This happened when I was about 15 or 16. That awkward stretch of summer where you're too old for toys and too young to drive, so you end up doing dumb stuff just to feel alive. My best friend Alex lived in one of those suburbs where all the houses look the same and nothing ever happens. We had a routine. I'd sleep over, wait for his parents to go to bed, and then we'd sneak out around 2 in the morning. We weren't causing trouble. We weren't breaking into cars or spray painting anything. We were just bored teenagers walking around in the dark, talking about whatever, getting a little adrenaline rush from hiding behind bushes whenever headlights swept through the trees. That was the whole game. Hide from the car, wait for it to pass, keep walking. On this particular night, the air was that thick late summer warmth, the kind where school starting back up feels like a threat. We'd already done our usual loop twice, and we were restless. That's when Alex brought up the camp. Some context. Behind the neighborhood, there were active railroad tracks, separated from the houses by a thin strip of woods. Walk down those tracks maybe a mile, and the woods got denser. People camped back there. We knew about it because we'd seen the worn-down trail leading into the brush during the day. Now, normally, 2 teenagers walking into a homeless camp at 2 in the morning is a spectacularly bad idea. But we had a reason to feel okay about it. One of the guys who lived back there was named Jerry, an old friend of Alex's dad from years back. Life had just taken them in different directions. Jerry wasn't dangerous. He'd come over to Alex's house a handful of times. Alex's dad let him shower there, gave him food, offered to help him find work. Jerry turned it down every time. He told them straight up, he liked living off the grid. No taxes, no boss, no lease. That was his choice.
So we figured we'd sneak up, see if Jerry was awake, maybe say hi, and head back. An adventure with a safety net is how it felt. We cut through a backyard, climbed the gravel embankment, and got up on the tracks. Walking on railroad ballast at night is loud. The gravel crunches under every step, and it echoes out into the dark on both sides. We tried walking on the wooden ties to be quieter, but the spacing was wrong, so we just balanced along the metal rails like tightrope walkers. The walk felt longer than it did during the day. At night, with the woods pressing in on both sides, it stretched out. Eventually, we smelled smoke. "Someone's definitely up," Alex said. We slowed down. Up ahead and to the left, the trees thinned out slightly, and we could see the orange flicker of a fire against the trunks. We stepped off the gravel onto the dirt path that ran alongside the tracks. The plan had seemed solid back in the bedroom. Out here in the dark, the what-ifs started showing up uninvited. What if Jerry isn't there? What if it's someone else who isn't friendly? So instead of walking straight into the camp, we decided to get eyes on it first. We crouched low and used the tall weeds as cover, working our way to about 100 feet out. The fire was a good size, lit up the immediate area around the tents and tarps nicely. I was scanning for Jerry's green jacket, his familiar beanie. That's when I saw the figure. It wasn't Jerry. It wasn't anyone sitting by the fire. Down the trail, past the camp, there was a silhouette, a person-shaped shadow standing at the very edge of the firelight, coming from deeper in the woods. Not walking toward the fire, not calling out to anyone, just standing completely still, facing the direction of the tracks, facing us. I grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him down. "Is that Jerry?" he hissed. "I don't think so. Jerry walks with a limp. That guy is standing perfectly straight." We watched for another 10 seconds. The figure didn't move toward the fire, didn't make a sound, just stood there. A heavy feeling dropped into my stomach. You know the exact moment when you realize you're not the one watching anymore? You're the one being watched? That was the moment. "I don't like this," I said. "We need to go." Alex didn't argue, same feeling. "Let's go." We started backing up slowly, staying low, trying to keep the brush between us and that silhouette. Moving through thick undergrowth in the dark is miserable. Every time my foot shifted, a twig snapped like a gunshot in the silence. After maybe 30 or 40 feet of that, I stopped. "I'd rather just get back on the trail," I told Alex quietly. "If we need to run, I want open ground." We played football. We were both fast. On the gravel, I liked our odds. In the vines and thorns, not so much. Alex nodded. On 3, we slipped back out onto the dirt path. I immediately looked back toward the camp. My heart slammed into my ribs. The figure had moved. It had crossed half the distance between the camp and where we were standing. Silently, without us hearing a single footstep. It was in the dimmer zone now, away from the firelight, but I could clearly make out someone standing there, facing us, watching us. Alex and I looked at each other, no words needed. We started walking fast, not running yet, but moving with real purpose back toward the bridge. 10 steps in, like we'd rehearsed it, we both looked back over our shoulders at the exact same moment. The silhouette was sprinting, full speed, booking it straight toward us. "Run!" We didn't hesitate. We took off as fast as our legs would go, sneakers slamming into the railroad ballast, the crunch of gravel deafeningly loud, our own breathing ragged in our ears. It felt like one of those nightmares where your legs are made of concrete, but we were actually flying. The trail was wide enough that we weren't bumping into each other, which helped. I didn't look back. I was terrified of what I'd see if I did. I just locked onto the wooden slats of the railroad bridge in the distance and ran toward them. The bridge crossed a creek, and there was nowhere to hide on it. Wide open, no cover. But on the other side was the residential street. If we made it across, we were close to safety. We hit the bridge, and our footsteps went from gravel crunch to loud, hollow echoes on the wood planks. I felt like I was going to throw up from the exertion and the fear combined. But I didn't slow down until we were fully on the other side. I grabbed the railing, spun around, gasping. Did we lose him? I stared back past the bridge into the darkness of the trail. Nothing. Empty. Dead silent, except for crickets and the sound of us trying to breathe. If that person had kept running at full speed, they would have been on the bridge by now. They'd stop somewhere back there, right at the edge of where the trees ended and the open bridge began. Stayed in the dark. We jogged the rest of the way back to Alex's neighborhood, checking over our shoulders every 10 seconds. We didn't care about hiding from headlights anymore. We just wanted walls around us. Climbed back through his window, locked it, and sat on the floor of his room for a solid hour, just listening, waiting for a tap on the glass. Nothing came. We never found out who that was. We never asked Jerry about it. We were too rattled to ever go back to those tracks, day or night. Could have been a squatter, a dealer, someone who just really didn't want to be found. I don't know what that person would have done if they'd caught us, but the way they closed 40 feet of distance without making a single sound, and then sprinted the second we stepped back onto the open trail, tells me they knew exactly what they were doing. I still think about that sometimes.